absolutely.
If we have questions for James directly, take a few now. Wait till the microphone gets to you. If you have questions to put to James from his presentation, thank you.
What do you know of the Irish contract agreements, the GCC contract? Do you think that BIM and IPD can fit within that project framework?
Well, the GCC contracts here in Ireland have the most recent version that they've come out with is focused on fixed price contracting as the mechanism for acquiring planning, design, and construction services. And in my experience, fixed price contracts, guaranteed maximum price contracts, low bid contracts are not the mechanism for achieving best value, okay? So that part of it is problematic. You can make BIM fit in a traditional contract environment. You need a BIM addendum if you are operating under a traditional agreement. BIM addenda, there's a whole bunch of different versions of that out there. The new digital practice documents that were put out by the AIA in the US very recently have a very good set of BIM related addendums that you can use. So you can always attach a good high quality BIM addendum to a traditional contract. And that is a mechanism whereby you lay out the rights and duties and responsibilities of the various players vis-a-vis the BIM, what's the BIM deliverable, who's going to be responsible for what, etc. That being said, it's not optimal because you're not encouraging the type of collaborative and cooperative processes that really enhance the BIM and make the BIM really useful.
But in theory, if time is given for full design in an integrated way, and you lock down the design and you allow the contractors then to price the project in a fixed price contract, it is possible to restrain variations or RFIs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the idea behind IPD and BIM generally is to, lock down the design, complete the design of the facility in a virtual world before you ever stick a shovel in the ground. What I would recommend to OPW, and I've recommended this to the GSA and others, they've all ignored me, but what I would say is form your integrated teams. Okay, do it the same way you've always done it. Okay, if you want to design it first and toss the design over the wall, really design it first. Get a contractor and a designer to come together, and on a piecemeal basis, as you need input from potential trade contractors, get those folks in the room as well and hammer out a real design. Finalize a real design that is truly final. And then toss that over the wall. Don't toss just a set of 2D drawings over the wall, which is what we do now.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, down here at the back.
James, I wonder, do you know if there's any intellectual property in the model that designers should be protecting in some way? I'm thinking about the long-term use of the model.
The intellectual property issue is there's an intellectual property protocol that can be attached to an IPD agreement, and you can also attach that intellectual property protocol to a traditional agreement. So there is intellectual property that is in the BIM models that needs to be protected. There's a lot of proprietary trade secret type information that's associated with business processes. One of the first things that we do early in the process when we're doing an IPD facilitation is negotiate a collaborative intellectual property protocol, and we enter into a non-disclosure agreement among the various parties. And just as the trade contractors and specialty designers are required to sign a joining agreement vis-a-vis the IPD agreement when they get on board, they're also required to sign the non-disclosure agreement, that collaborative intellectual property agreement that we've put in place. So yes, there is intellectual property there that does need to be protected, and there are mechanisms for protecting it. The electronic, I can't remember the name of it. I'm thinking of 3 different instruments that are out there that I've read that deal with this. The AIA's digital practice documents addresses intellectual property issues, and I can't remember whether it's in the BIM implementation plan that they have or in the BIM addendum. There's 3 or 4 different instruments. The consensus docs also has a very good intellectual property piece in their electronic protocol. And then Autodesk came out about 3 or 4 years ago with a really good electronic communications protocol that was, I've got a copy of it somewhere. I remember reading it and doing a blog post on it. I thought it was a really good mechanism for addressing how we deal with the electronic communications back and forth, and it at least touched on the intellectual property issues. But if you want to protect your IP, you need to have that non-disclosure agreement that is addressed up front if you're going to be getting into a truly integrated and collaborative agreement where a whole bunch of different entities are sharing information and IP and trade secrets and proprietary information. And what you're saying is we're all going to collaborate, we're all going to work together on this, but please don't take my stuff and, hand it off to my competitors. And you're all agreeing to be bound by that promise in that non-disclosure agreement.
One more question there, yeah?
Hopefully it's not too difficult. James, many thanks for that fantastic talk. One question, I can see how the construction team can start building up trust amongst each other, but in your experience, how do you bring the owner to trust the construction team in its entirety? How do you build that trust?
I think the best way to build trust with owners is to under-promise and over-deliver. I would be very careful about being too drunk on my BIM whiskey when I go in to talk to owners. There's a tendency, especially with all the bells and whistles we have in the software, to promise owners the sun, the moon, and the stars, or to leave them with the impression, at least, that the sun, the moon, and the stars are available. So that's my caution with respect to this and owners. All owners love and trust their contractors and their designers who deliver on time and on budget. So that's the other thing that you can do to build trust with them. And it's very hard to build anticipatory trust with an owner. What's your history? What do I know about you? What's your track record? The other thing that I think can be done in this regard, in this environment where we're trying to convince owners that we ought to move forward with this, is to begin tracking those metrics on the pilot projects. Begin tracking the metrics on projects that you're actually working on, okay? Please don't tell me you're waiting for an owner to request BIM, okay? You need to be operating on a BIM platform for your own survival's sake, all right? You need to get your organization up to speed and rolling on BIM so that you will be able to compete globally in this emerging information and knowledge economy. You cannot compete in the emerging information and knowledge economy if you are not prepared to compete and play in the BIM sandbox, okay? So the best way to do that, if you don't have a BIM model in your portfolio, is to go home and model your kitchen. Go model your bathroom. Go model your kid's doghouse. Have a model that you have done and start using BIM in your own organization. And I'll tell you, I mean, I have seen my general contracting clients in the US seize upon BIM, capture BIM talent and bring it in-house and leverage it to the nines. I mean, they get it and they use it and they're leveraging it. And there is absolutely no excuse for the designers not to get with the program. You've got to do it. You've got to do it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to turn around and shell out a whole bunch of money, you know, for all these licenses and do all these things and all the hardware and all the training all at once. I understand that it is a cost, but it is a cost of survival. It is a cost of necessity. We've got to do it in order to compete in this information and knowledge age, okay? Because other people are doing it all around the world. You know, in Ohio, I saw a general contractor take the drawings associated with a $300 million hospital and he shipped them straight to China. So turn them into a BIM for me. Get that BIM model back, and they leveraged it and took advantage of every competitive advantage it gave them. They made a ton of money on that project. And after that, they said, we're not going to spend our money in China anymore. We're going to create an in-house BIM department that can do that for us in-house. So start doing it.
Okay, thank you. I know we have some more questions, but I just want to put a question to you, our audience this morning. As you know, we have a workshop question to answer, but the enthusiasm I detect in the room for our speaker this morning is such that maybe we'd prefer to continue with a question and answer session with James. Is that what people would prefer? It is. Just keep the questions coming then. And James, if you don't mind standing on your feet a little longer, you can sit down if you choose and
I'm all good.
be informal, okay?
I'm good.
Okay, guys, keep the questions coming then. Thank you.
James, actually I wanted to suggest maybe you have some questions for the audience, like just to get a sense of where our industry is and you know, how what you're saying could relate directly to what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, Ralph, that's probably a good idea. Let's take this one more question in the back, and then I think it'd be, if we're not going to do the answer the specific question workshop thing, I think what Ralph is suggesting would be a really good idea. I'll go around the room table by table and have you guys give me a little feedback, and then we'll continue with the questions. In the back.
Hi, James. My compliments on your excellent talk there. I just like to ask a question about the contractual models for the collaborative working, and I was just wondering whether you feel that standard forms or maybe more bespoke agreements, I was just wondering which ones, in your opinion, better facilitate the collaborative working.
Well, there's no instrument that you can take off the shelf right now and simply plug in the names of the parties and expect it to be a collaborative or integrated instrument that reflects the needs of that integrated team on that project. The construction industry has been spoiled over the last 50 or 60 years by standardized agreements. I've got clients that do this all the time. they pull out the last agreement, they have their secretary white out the names, you know, they run it through the copier and then put in the new names, and that's the agreement they want to use. You know, that's part of our problem in the industry, is that we've become too dependent on standardized legal agreements. Now, there's always boilerplate language that matters and that's important. But there's also the deal that needs to be struck vis-a-vis this project. And I think part of what's happening with integrated agreements is that we're going back to the negotiation table and back to, you know, this deal striking element. And that's a good thing. The good instruments that are out there as a good starting point are the Consensus Docs 301, which is the integrated form of agreement that is offered by Consensus Docs. They have a accompanying BIM 302 instrument, which I think is essentially their BIM addendum. And then they've got a number of other instruments that are pretty good quality instruments as well. The AIA, their new digital practice documents, I've read through those now and looked at what they had before and what they do now, and I think that they're a big step in the right direction, and those are the kinds of things that you can use as an attachment to even a traditional contract when you need a BIM addendum. Of course, collaborative construction has a wealth of form agreements that we start with. We've got strategic alliance agreements that we can arm a cluster group with if a group wants to start a strategic alliance. We've got an instrument that an owner can use to launch a RFP through which they solicit bids from integrated teams. Then we have, of course, the integrated agreement and many others. Why don't we go around the room, and what I'd like for you guys to do is to just, at each table, y'all can start visiting among yourselves about this question and pick a spokesperson at the table and just give me this feedback. I'd like to know what your pain point is from the perspective of either a contractor, your pain point from the perspective of a designer, your pain point from the perspective of an owner, a trade contractor, a vendor, a supplier, whomever. If we've got different voices at the table, let's hear those pain points, and that'll give me a little more context as I'm trying to advocate for the use of these tools here in Ireland, okay? Let's do that quickly if we can around the room, and then we can continue our questions.